Alex, good afternoon. My name is Hlib Vyshlinsky. I'm the Executive Director of the Center of Economic Strategy. We are running our project with the support of the European Union. Immediately, information for our international speakers. The English translation can be turned on at the lower panel of the Zoom. Those of you who want to participate in the discussion, the questions to speakers, you can leave in the Q&A section. That's the best option because where we will have some in writing or in chat in the beginning, we will have some introductory words from the representative of the European Union delegation in Ukraine. Then we will have the monthly review of the expenditures and procurement in the recovery sphere. And in the second part of the event, there will be a discussion, what we're talking about, the topic of the medical institutions recovery. This event was prepared within the control of measures for the recovery of Ukraine, controlling the costs for rebuilding Ukraine. This program is realized together with the Economic Center of Economic Strategy, the Institute of Economic Research and Political Consultations, Technological Progress, and the RISE Coalition, as well as with Прямуємо Разом. I would like to ask to take the floor the manager of this sector of the sector, Ekaterina Yakovleva. Ekaterina, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Gleb. So dear participants, dear organizers of this event, I would like to welcome you to this conference on behalf of the EU delegation to Ukraine. Let me first mention, as it was already highlighted by Gleb, that this conference is organized in the framework of a project, Recovery Spending Watchdog, which is funded by the European Union. So I would like to start by saying that as a person responsible for the EU assistance to the reform of public procurement in Ukraine, I'm very interested and curious in hearing from the speakers at today's event about challenges, but also solutions related to procurement of reconstruction in health sector, health facilities. I would also like to take this occasion to share some updates related to latest developments in the accession of Ukraine to the EU, which will impact the way the public procurement is organized in the country. As you probably know, on the 25th of June, the first EU-Ukraine intergovernment conference took place, which opened the accession negotiations. Chapter 5, which is the chapter dedicated to public procurement, was the first one to be assessed by the European Commission in a meeting which took place earlier this month, on the 8th and the 9th of July. The conclusions of that meeting will be available later by the end of the year, because the report will cover not only the chapter 5, but also other chapters of the so-called fundamentals. So the focus of the assessment at that meeting was, of course, very much on the legal framework. And here I would like to mention that the authorities are expected to make tangible progress with aligning the laws on public procurement with the EU legislation. This covers the law on public procurement, but also the laws on concessions, private-public partnerships, and the procurement in defense sector. I would like to say that the legal alignment will enable mutual opening of public procurement markets, which is envisaged in the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement. This means that the Ukrainian companies will be able to bid in public tenders in the EU and vice versa. And this will concern all areas, including concessions and PPPs. Increased participation of EU companies in public contracts in Ukraine should enable a transfer of best practices and know-how. You would agree that this is important for the construction sector. So today we will be speaking about construction in health sector, where significant challenges in terms of competitiveness, efficiency, and ensuring value for money remain. Ukraine could also learn from the EU countries, but also accession countries in terms of centralized and joint procurement, which is still underused in Ukraine, especially at regional and local level. Another very important aspect, which was discussed in Brussels during the screening meeting on Chapter 5, was transparency and integrity of public procurement. Here, as an accession country, Ukraine will need to develop an effective anti-corruption framework in public procurement area to enable that fraud and corruption are detected, prosecuted, and punished. From this point of view, collaboration with civil society is an important factor to provide for greater transparency and also bring to light corruption risks. So I'm very glad that we cooperate with the Center for Economic Strategy and the Institute for Economic Research in the framework of this project, and also some other reputable Ukrainian NGOs such as Transparency International and Hromadske Control. So thanks a lot. I'm looking for an interesting and informative meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Katerina. Now I will have a standard part of our monthly review. That's actually the presentation of the controlling costs for recovery. As it is mentioned, number 11. In my case, it's been already 11 times that we have been doing this control of the costs of rebuilding Ukraine. And we are preparing the response, the relevant presentation. So I would like to give the floor now to Oleksandra Betliy, and we will then continue the presentation. After Alexander, Volodymyr Landa, the senior economist of CES. Please, the floor is yours, Alexandra. Welcome to everybody. That's really a regular presentation. Out of the main slides, I will show just several ones. Apart from everything, I wanted to stop at the regulatory framework, the draft law that we talked about several times, about the necessary publication of the prices. It was finally approved in July. So we believe that it will be soon prepared for the second reading, and this will be very much important to make sure that the procurement would become more transparent and it will be easier to monitor. Ministry of Recovery continued to work on the strategy of the regional development. This is one of the plans for Ukraine, where we receive money from the European Union, and that's very important. Today, we have had the first public consultation after a certain break in terms of the recovery. The Committee of the Verkhovna Rada made it one of their priority projects, and there will be now some discussions in a way how to do this. Should we make a separate draft law about the basis for recovery, define this? And the second question, which is being solved, is the architecture of the planning documents. That's also very important because the local self-governance bodies have to prepare a lot of documents, and of course, this is not yet done in a good quality manner. Regional recovery services have approved a new procedure for organizing public procurement developed by the agency. That's very important because that means that the access to recovery for several legal entities, there will be a single order for all of this procurement. The only question here that the procedure has not yet been made public, so we will try to push through to make sure we can look at it and which changes did take place. From the positive news, what has happened over the previous months, we have seen some additional money for the projects for recovery. the government has made an order on the distribution of subventions from the state budget to local budgets for the arrangement of safe conditions in healthcare facilities. That is, the shelters will be built in more scale, especially in healthcare institutions, and we will see this from DREAM. If you have downloaded our presentation, we have a separate slide, and we understand that there has been a lot more projects in the healthcare facilities, and this is, among other things, mostly this is about shelters. Also, the government has decided to allocate 6.8 billion hryvnia for the e-restoration program. It is 2.4 billion to be allocated for housing repairs and 4.4 billion for housing certificates. So altogether, this is 6.8 billion that the government has decided to allocate. This has become possible after we have received an additional tranche from the World Bank, which is directed to finance this program. So this program is financed right now at the expense and with the possibilities of donors. We had 274 million hryvnia for local projects. That's almost twice as much as in June. So we see that the financing continues and it's actually speeding up. And this month's topic we wanted to discuss is actually recovery in the healthcare institutions, because it's very critical for people's lives, and people need to make the decisions whether they should return home. They really pay attention whether there is an access to health protection on the spot. Of course, there are a lot of questions about their housing, but access to healthcare is absolutely critical for people's lives. According to the Ministry of Reconstruction, more than 1,643 healthcare institutions have been damaged. Out of them, 1,253 were damaged up to 50%, while 390 were damaged by more than 50%. Some of these institutions were fully destroyed. These figures do not include those institutions which are now on the temporarily occupied territory, so in reality, the figures are much more. And in different oblasts, 523 medical institutions have been fully restored, and another 362 have been partially restored. But we see that the ruining, unfortunately, destruction, unfortunately, is much faster than this. And more medical facilities have been damaged last month. That says that the access to healthcare remains a significant issue on separate territories. We have looked at the key stakeholders. First of all, it's the Ministry of Health Protection, who are responsible for healthcare policy. They prioritize reconstruction in the healthcare sector, and they have created committees to determine funding from the United 24 funds. This is exactly at the expense of the charitable contributions that are financing the sphere of health protection. The Agency of Restoration has implemented a number of significant projects. Some of them pertain to the comprehensive reconstruction projects, where we have some big projects that include the recovery of and rebuilding of hospitals and ambulatoriums. Regional military administrations and communities, they are taking care of the recovery on the ground. They initiate restoration projects, they develop design and estimate documentation, they make actually procurement. Also, they organize the restoration, they involve donors. So basically, looking at decentralization, we have a significant role played exactly by the regional military administrations, and they're basically the initiators of these restoration projects, and they are responsible for filling these projects and updating them on the DREAM system. International donors are also financing reconstruction projects either directly or through NGOs or the budget, and we have a number of NGOs and charitable foundations who are implementing this. They can really rebuild, reconstruct hospitals. If we talk about the Kiev Oblast, one of the ambulatoriums was recovered by Greenpeace and Eco Club at the expense of donors' funds, and that's a great example because they have really taken into account some approaches to energy efficiency and energy independence. So at the expense of which do we have the funding for healthcare recovery? That's all possible and impossible funds that arrive to Ukraine from various sources. Last year, same as in the beginning of this year, the fund for liquidation of the consequences of the armed aggression has been one of the biggest sources for financing the recovery. And we can say that now this fund basically doesn't have that much anymore. In the beginning of the year, they have allocated all the funds that were available, and the confiscated Russian assets also have the potential. There is also some discussion about privatization. So in any case, this fund can receive some more funds. United 24, that's the money raised from really benefactors, charitable organizations throughout the world. And one of the accounts at United 24, it is aimed at restoring the destroyed medical care facilities. This is like a special account, special budget, and the funds from it are really used for the recovery of health care institutions. We also have subventions from the state budgets. This could be a special subvention for the construction or rebuilding of shelters and bomb shelters in healthcare facilities. Funds from local authorities, of course, it remains also a source, meaning the local authorities can themselves repair major premises. Donors and charitable foundations, also NGOs, they really also put together their efforts to rebuild such institutions. It's important to understand that donors nowadays, they are this multi-faceted support for the recovery of health protection. When we say recovery, we are talking about, first of all, about the walls, about reconstruction. Now it's important to rebuild the access, to restore the access to high quality assistance. For this, we need not just walls, we need good medical equipment, we need medicine, we need some other possibilities to make sure we give high quality medical assistance. In the frontline zones, we have some examples when the charitable foundations or various donors, they have been supplying modular hospitals, once again, to give services to people in the front line and deoccupied territories. And the reconstruction of hospitals is partially done at the expense of donors. And you can see a huge list of logotypes that really help us to see who is actually helping us. And as already said, we have a number of projects. There are actually more than 600 healthcare projects on DREAM. Some are already being implemented, some are already waiting for financing. By far, not all. I'm just reminding you this from previous time. The projects on DREAM, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a confirmed financing project. So there are some projects which local authorities are initiating and they would want to find financing for them, but this financing maybe still is not available. But partially, this was one of the ideas from the DREAM in order to show projects which are searching for financing, and possibly some donors can take them in order to finance this or that project. What else we need to take into account during recovery? I just wanted to end with this. First of all, what seems to me, what we do not have, what exactly we should need to rebuild. Definitely we need to rebuild access to main services. It's absolutely the primary assistance. It's the outpatient care. It's also the accessibility to all necessary medicines and psychological assistance. This is becoming mental health support, and the ability to give psychological assistance. This is some skill that is so much necessary for family doctors. We have to understand that not all institutions specialized assistance do require and do need to be recovered. We have some data before the big war have shown us that we have too many institutions of specialized assistance compared with the European Union. Also, the approaches are changing how to give this medical assistance. Last year, we heard about the initiative of one of the oblasts to build a TB hospital, and then the agency turned down this project, having talked to the Ministry of Health Protection. just because the world experience says that we don't need to build separate TB hospitals for the provision of this assistance. So we have to take into account the new approaches, and we have to take into account that, unfortunately, some population has already gone from Ukraine. That means not all the beds, not all the hospitals will be necessary. We have to think about it because the funds are limited, but the needs are huge. Also, with the decision whether to build or to renew certain institutions, we have to take into account the financial resilience of the communities, because it's exactly the local authorities who are responsible for maintaining them. National health services doing the medicines and services, and the rest, like the utilities and the salaries, the rest of the costs that should be done at the expense of the local authorities. First of all, if we talk about the principles of the recovery, that should be people-centered, barrier-free access, because the number of people with handicap, with disability grows, energy independence, energy efficiency, Earth-friendly approach is very important. Of course, it's much more expensive to build it, but it's more cheap than to further maintain it. So it's a more sustainable model for the future. And we have to keep also the principles of transparency and accountability, especially when we talk about energy efficiency and energy independence. In the framework of this project, we are doing some sub-grants to NGOs. By the way, tomorrow we have already submit your project, because tomorrow is the deadline. And unfortunately, looking at these grant applications, we see that not all of these principles are taken care of us. Not all the institutions are barrier-free, or you are taking into account the aspect of energy independence or earth friendliness. So I believe the Ministry of Health Protection and Ministry of Reconstruction will be working in this direction in order to define these approaches and the principles of recovery, which are necessary for the future. And once again, the transparency and accountability are top importance. And that's, I would like to pass the floor to Volodymyr Landa, who has actually analyzed procurement in the sphere of a medical world. He will tell us what is with transparency and transparency and accountability. Thank you, Alexander. We will put up the slides on the screen now. Okay, if you see it, allow me to say a few words about medical compliance. It's the review that we are making every month, but today we will concentrate exactly on medical procurement. Over half a year, we have seen announcements about 4.3 thousand medical procurements. We're not talking about all medical procurements, but we're exactly talking about the construction procurements in the medical sphere. So of this, 93.2% were completed. 3.3% did not take place, and the full amount of medical procurement in the first 6 months amount to 5.5 billion hryvnia, including the current amount in June, 0.7 billion. The e-procurement system was used for 0.6 thousand completed procurements, that's 16%, for a total amount of 4.7 billion, which is 85%. So if we talk in general, the healthcare procurement in the healthcare, it's 3 times less. So we can see that the procurement is much more. If we look at the procurement for the biggest organizers, for the biggest winners, these figures can be compared. Sometimes the organizers and the winners only have to do with one big object. We understand there's also some regional specifics. So the majority of the procurement is coinciding with the western part of Ukraine, the Dnipropetrovsk and Poltava regions. If we look at the very specific procurements, we can see those 5 procurements for Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, for the Khmelnytsk Oblast, and one of them is still for Zhytomyr Oblast. We will not put a lot of attention to this issue on the procurement which don't pertain the recovery in the healthcare facilities. I remind you that we will have the full version of the presentation on the website. Also, I would like to tell you about the competition is quite limited, I would say. We, out of 615 identified reconstruction tenders using the electronic system, only 32% were competitive. The share of procurements with 2 tenders among competitive procurements was 58.5%. In the same way, some 10% only pertains to amounts where we had 3 or more tenders. So that's quite average amount. I would really love that you look up at our presentation. There will be figures from all types of procurement. They already have reached almost 116 billion hryvnia since the beginning of the year. And in June, the pace has become a little bit less. So we are seeing the biggest. We also have some information about the leaders of the procurement. We can see that one of the biggest winners was at the expense of one of the biggest tenders. It's for the reconstruction of subway in the city of Kyiv. So I would like to complete here and pass the floor to my colleagues. Thank you, Volodymyr. Oleksandra, thank you. Now let us come back to our specialized topic of today. Let me remind you that's, again, rebuilding of the medical institutions, something that Oleksandr has touched upon. So we are now moving to the discussion by various participants of the recovery that will be based on the information which you have been able to see in the presentation. And the first one, I would like to ask Taras Grytsenko. Taras is the head of the project office from the Recovery Office of the Health Protection Ministry. And the question is about prioritization, how to rebuild healthcare institutions. Taras, please, the floor is yours. Please tell us how you see this situation. Thank you. Good afternoon. Many thanks for the invitation. Yes, I do represent the project office of the Ministry of Health Protection. That's the advisory body that was created with the aim of coordination, partially of reforms and partially the infrastructure projects, which with the full-scale invasion became understood that the assistance in this additional management and to make sure that the ministry would have it more easy to where to guide resources, including the assistance and the international partners. So for that reason, this office was created. Therefore, we are proposing solutions. We are proposing assistance to the ministries. So we are managing or helping with the management, not only with those projects that are coming via the international partners, but also through some backup funds, also in the state budgets. So the prioritization areas were clearly defined by Ms. Oleksandra, which we basically use the same presentation. We have some general vision of the priority of assistance. That's, first of all, the recovery of access to the basic adequate level of the medical assistance. This access can be lost not only through direct attacks on healthcare institutions where we have thousands of cases, but also the change in the frontline and significant processes of the internal displacement of the population where the institutions are not coping with the load and some others. It's also important to mention that really the priorities or the approaches can be sometimes contradictory to one another, especially what concerns the so-called capacity of institutions to maintain these institutions that often contradicts the experience. In those regions which we need to restore access to medical assistance, very often they have a huge number of problems, and temporarily they are not capable financially in supporting these institutions. So for this, they're searching for other instruments, including financing at the expense of the National Health Service. There are separate packages that help to support frontline regions some other institutions. Also within prioritization, there is an important component, is not to concentrate only on recovery, but also to look into strategically into the development of the network as a comprehensive notion. Also to build up the good, capable network. It is foreseen that every institution that has come to this uh, special network, it has its own role. It's not limited to its role. And the expense of own funds, own development, they can give primary assistance in the direction which are not basic, but they do have the capacity, and they can continue to search investment in this direction, and who have to, according to their role in this capable network, to have the minimum number of directions of medical assistance. Now this capable network is um, done in the majority of oblasts. Also, Kharkiv Oblast was not also in these priority plans because they are too close to the hostilities, but they have made the initiative, and they also have approved this capable network, and we're also moving into this direction. Honestly speaking, in the beginning, we had some wish to create some instrument that at the expense of various changes of data and entering this data and update of this data would still be able, with the high level automation and the minimum interference from human beings, to weigh the priorities, which institution need to be prioritized. But again, as was mentioned, there are lots of limitations, the requirements of donors. They have some also priorities, some donors and the governments of countries, they are taking care of some regions or some industries. And although there could be another prioritization, they can basically influence the projects to be selected. We are able to manage this process. The possibility to quickly develop the medical TORs. It concerns not only recovery, but also equipment purchase and the readiness of the institutions, especially when we have large-scale equipment that the hospitals should be ready. They should confirm that they have professionals who are ready to work on that, because any investment that is guided for the recovery, for the equipment, for the development of the stuff, they have to show immediately the result and to show and continue working, not to be postponed, that this equipment would not be standing around in boxes in case there are any questions, clarifications, because the topic is general. In the project office, we have some 8 people, and we have lots of other people who are working in the ministry and in the procurement of Ukraine, and also in the regional departments of the regional departments of health protection. So ministry is really directing its effort in order to adequately introduce the platform and to start implementing projects for shelters and to renew Okhmatdyt, one of the flagship projects. This could become, by a dream as well. Thank you, Taras. We will be discussing this further. I would like to ask Zhanna Sherstiuk to the work, who is the deputy head of the Chernihiv Regional Military Administration. So the question is, to which extent the approach that we have in the ministry coincides with your needs, how this prioritization takes place in the oblast that suffered one of the first ones, and its infrastructure also suffered significantly from the Russian aggression. Zhanna, please. Good afternoon, colleagues. Yes, it's important to start with figures. For the April 2022, Chernihiv was one of the few regions which had the biggest number of destroyed medical infrastructure. We had 30 we had 75 objects ruined. We have been very effectively using this time and the readiness of international donors to rebuild our region. In some 20 institutions, we renewed 46 objects. For this, we used this state budget resources. That's the fund for the liquidation of consequences and the state subventions. But the lion's share of the contribution into recovery is, of course, from international donors and NGOs. If we talk in figures, from the state budget, we have engaged some 60 million hryvnia, with some 130 million hryvnia engaged from donors. There is some other major recovery instrument. That's the platform United 24, where in cooperation with the Ministry of Health Protection and the project office, we have already the third objects being implemented. 2 of them were successfully completed. And nowadays, in the implementation, we are happy that one of the institutions that would have almost the fully destroyed building, this was the polyclinic of the Central District Hospital in Chernihiv. So today we are already starting the construction works under this object. If we talk about the challenges, the biggest are the ones which are connected with the expensive large-scale projects, because whatever pertained is about closing the perimeter to make sure that the institution would continue providing medical service with the help of donors, with the help of activizing the NGO sector, the civil funds. We are always quite quick with that, but still there are a few projects which are quite expensive, large scale, and which are lengthy in time. So that's where we have a certain problem. I can give you some example. In 2022, there was the air strike to one of the health centers. We did some cost estimate in terms of recovering this building, but not for the cardio center, but for the rehabilitation center placement. At this time, the interest is not that huge because lots of investment has to be put inside into these objects. Of course, we understand that we are the bordering region and such long-term investments, they're quite risky. Moreover, the attacks continue on medical infrastructure and in Chernihiv Oblast as well. In April, we fixed already the repeated destruction of the Chernihiv Central District Hospital that I mentioned just minutes before. And most likely, in the process of the implementation of the project, we would need to adjust it because after the repeated air strike that took place in April, the building suffered again. Basically, from the priorities that were discussed by the colleagues from the project office, we agree because we have the capable network and we understand that not everything has to be restored in the way that it existed before the full-scale aggression or until a certain attack. And therefore, accordingly, we are building up our priorities. The main priority, as my colleagues said, is the access to medical services. If for this it is necessary to just put in windows and to fix the roof, then it's done quite quickly. If we need to relocate the institution, then we do that, like we did with our TB dispenser in 2022. If for this we would need to do some cost and estimate documentation with the implementation of new solutions in terms of the energy efficiency and barrier-free access, and in terms of the general approaches to organizing medical services. Of course, this is also implemented, but maybe not as quickly as I would want it to have. Many thanks, Ms. Zhanna. So we will go over the first circle and then we will start the discussion. with those experts that we have that were reviewing the situation. And now I would like to ask to the microphone Anastasiya Maksymova. She is the professional for charitable funds, Patients of Ukraine, one of the well-known Patients of Ukraine charitable foundations. This is one of the biggest organizations that work with the reform of the system of health protection. So please, Anastasia, the floor is yours. Many thanks, Hlib. It's a great pleasure to participate in this discussion. It's very important to have such venues. We understand for the Patients of Ukraine Charitable Foundation, the activity to restore medical institutions is not standard. Nevertheless, we have the database of donors. We turned in the beginning of the war to them when we had the understanding that it's not possible to provide medical services when we don't have the infrastructure. So with this proposal, with such kind of questions, we have come to donors, and we were very happy that they responded. And starting from June 2022, we were able to repair 46 hospitals, meaning ambulatoriums, meaning the primary care institutions, and at the deoccupied territories. So our fund would go there where the destructions was the biggest. And we, in the same way, we were also looking at your presentations. We were evaluating all risks. We understood whether the people are there still. Is there any medical staff that is ready to provide such services? Are there any medical services that are provided in hospitals or ambulatoriums nearby? So we were making this assessment. We also implemented the component, meaning from the point of view, how far are these outpatient institutions? Are they far away from the front line? Wouldn't they be once again destroyed? Also, we joined the Okhmatdyt project. And we have talked to the hemostasis. Unfortunately, there's been another attack on the infectious center. And in the same way as colleagues said, the problem is that it's being destroyed quicker compared to how quickly we can restore that. From the interesting points, one of the important components of our recovery was that we implemented the civil monitoring. So we have gone through the training from Integrity Action that are making such monitoring, such international monitoring for the recovery projects in various countries of the world. And then our experts could teach volunteers on the ground to make sure they could come, look at it, what was happening, how the process is taking place, that this is taking place, and report. So in reality, we are registering the problem of this monitoring. So monitoring should have access to documents, and secondly, to the institution itself. And this approach that we have for the time being, the most important thing is that the company that actually orders this, they should be interested in the monitoring. They should be interested in making sure that the process of recovery would be transparent, to make sure that it's effective. Because when we're talking about the problems related to the repairs, always the construction, it's exactly these civil volunteers, these people who are doing the monitoring, they have to come to stakeholders, raise this issue, and to search for common ways to resolve that. We have been turned numerously by civil organizations or just volunteers who want to monitor the process of recovery in their hromadas. And the only thing that we could actually advise them, come to us, we will build up your capacity, go through training. But in order to implement this mechanism of monitoring, of physical monitoring, in order to control the process itself, that has to be, you have to go to the ones who are ordering this. And very often this is the local authorities. This is something that you have also shown on your slides, because you do have some leverages on local authorities. You don't need to go all the time to the head of the of the administration. Maybe you have to work with the parliamentaries, with the deputies, but the interest has to be there. Also, we propose to Okhmatdyt to become the part of the supervisory board or some other advisory body for the recovery of this project. And this negotiation is still in progress because we do believe that it's very important that the civil society would be engaged into the monitoring in the process of recovery. That's number one. But in general, what is important for us? That's not necessarily the uncovering of corruption per se, although that's also important. It's mostly about the understanding what has been declared in the project is what is going to be exactly what will be built. And for this, we need also to implement civil monitoring. And also for the fact that these communities and the ones who are receiving this service, they should know that what they will be getting. Because very often we have seen projects with expectations. There were certain expectations of Hromada or the management organizations that they would build together in order for everybody to understand where this recovery is aimed at. And if you ask any doctor in any hospital, they would say that we need to repair everything. But we are also working with the Ministry of Health and with the Reconstruction Office in order to have that bigger overview, bigger picture of what needs to be rebuilt. So that's why we have concentrated in the beginning of the full-scale war exactly on the primary care, because we have the understanding that the primary care should exist. But the secondary, the understanding that to build on the secondary part, this understanding came with the capable network. And we often advise donors to make use of that information so they could know where it's necessary to direct their efforts. I also wanted to say that really the problems of financing have become very acute. We have a lot of many things that can be, many more that need to be rebuilt. But of course, Hromadas do require inclusivity, the extension of services of the primary care. That's also very important. But the reality is such that for the implementation of the project, because donor wants to give the funds for some short-term projects with lesser risks, so when you talk to the donor, they are asking about the effectiveness. Because now we don't have the construction teams where... Can you hear me, or the internet is a little bit lagging behind? Yeah, from time to time, yeah, the internet is lagging behind, yeah. Okay, let me complete then, and let me say that yes, these are the priorities that were mentioned. We fully agree with that. We also want to implement them comprehensively, but we have to also work with donors, and we have to show that not always we can do everything under our conditions. Thank you, Anastasiya. Yes, then we will have some discussion. If your internet is not very stable, maybe you can turn off the video. I would like to ask Oleksandra for comments. She was making her own analysis. Oleksandra, maybe you have certain comments or questions to what has been mentioned by our partners, especially from the Oblast administration and from the non-governmental center. Oleksandra, please. Yes, once again, good afternoon. If possible, I just wanted to clarify a little bit from Mr. Taras in terms of the capable network, because I do know that it does exist. And I also know that not all the authorities are happy, or they are supporting this network. Sometimes they're searching for funds for those institutions which are not capable. So in which way you are resolving these conflicts, and what would you advise to Ms. Zhanna, to Chernihiv Oblast, who are searching for a big donor for a project? Can you help them in some way in searching for projects? And also a question from Ms. Zhanna. Did you put this project on Dream that you're searching for the donors funds, or it's not that it's not there yet at Dream? I just wanted to clarify this. Taras, please, could you mention this? When we formed the capable network, of course, we understood that there could be potential conflict situations, so we tried to bring them to minimum. The ministry actually took on the role of concurring this capable network, but the initiative went from down and up. Of course, there were certain conflict situations persisting, but we demanded that they would align the protocols of positions, and even there was certain opinions that the projects would still have a special role prescribed, and there was also some cases when in separate regions we gave the institution the status of the cluster institution, but because of some period of time that had to be revisited in terms of their status in accordance with the representatives of the medical assistance. And that absolutely would not exclude the idea that our clusters are independent. They can turn to many places. From time to time, we have some information from partners who already understand how the ministry is working, and the project office from abroad, from other partners, with the request to verify the requests. Sometimes this is the requests that are coming from the institutions themselves. It's not always that they really comply with the role, or sometimes the small hospital is asking for some big equipment. They're doing some super specialized things which they're not doing this. Of course, we can't fully avoid such kind of situations, so we're working some soft skills, some authority of the ministry, and the possibility to quickly discuss their problems when they're turning to us, and to give some feedback or to satisfy them thanks to the international support, or to understand quickly why not now, why not in the first priority. And mostly that is not working. There is the understanding how the system works and how the interaction is taking place, but there is no 100% guarantee. In terms of the situation in the Chernihiv Oblast, yes, this is not that many donors who are ready to finance big projects, but those who are ready, their bureaucratic processes in reality not that different from the complexity of the Ukrainian reality. Sometimes they are even more difficult. They have quite a lot of requirements in terms of transparency, and we have a lot of discussions with a lot of agencies financed by governments of France, Japan, Korea, and Germany. And some of them have been for more than 1 year discussions, but it didn't come to the direct implementation exactly because of a lot of bureaucratic problems. But we have good operation of cases. If there are some positive cases, there is some quick result and there is a good result. Of course, that takes away the pressure, and it shows to donors that yes, you can work on that. That also takes care of the for instance, in Lviv Oblast, there's a good example of managing these processes. And they continue to search the possibility to invest. So those regions who don't have this capacity to manage that, they are even further from this possibility because they have the full resource to catch these first possibilities which are provided them. Thank you. I think I have a question to Ms. Zhanna, and then one more question to clarify this. I wanted to expand the reply of Mr. Taras in terms of the capable network, because we did this a year ago, and we need to support this idea from the Ministry of Health, because we have a number of hospitals before we introduce the capable network that could aim for some priority packages for surgery and the like, not guaranteeing quality for patients of this service. And here in Oblast administration, in the health department of our region, we understood that this is a certain really scattering of the state resources. We should be responsible for the roots of the patients and for the quality of service that they're doing. So this capable network is reality. It's about guaranteed quality and concentration of resource exactly in these institutions. So this is an absolute correct direction. So what concerns our project, it's still in the progress of completion, but understanding those bureaucratic procedures that Taras was talking about, we started communications well ahead with international organizations, and we really hope that it's exactly in our case. The case story will work well, because this story about recovery of the central district policy, this was the government of France who has taken on, can really show that we are a reliable partner, and this will attract the attention to our next project. So no, we have not yet put it on stream. I just also wanted to clarify from Mr. Taras, last year we were involved to the development of the methodology of prioritization, which had to be used for the recovery and using this liquidation fund. And there were a lot of very different indicators, what need to be developed and what to be not. So this was like a certain system of transparency. But when you said that you refused from the so-called indicative approach of prioritization, and you're doing it slightly differently, can you please explain to us how you are setting up prioritization? This will be interesting for communities in order for us to understand what is your level of prioritization based on and how to correctly analyze it. The basic indicators have also stayed, and they are very much in line with other spheres. It's the damages, the absence of the alternative places for healthcare, the preserved staff, and the absence of the base. So these basic indicators are working, and we have some major projects as United 24. They have also the Ukrainian humanitarian project. They help them to also take in certain approaches. But the problem also is that a lot of indicators, they're based on the historical provision of medical assistance. Roughly speaking, the biggest choice in terms of the information about their capacity, it's what we look back at the historical data, how many services were given, etc., etc. But it's not synchronized with the real population that stays in these regions now that they have not left from there. And it's really not synchronized with the real current capacities of this institution and with the conditions of this medical assistance, including the absence, the access of the roads, the routes of patients. Therefore, in the conditions where the potential risks of negative consequences, when the decision needs to be taken, when it can be higher than the positive ones, and we are not sure that this data, on the basis of which can make these decisions, that they are verified, we better apply some additional instruments, some consultations, some trips to the field, some field trips, talking to the people, and with the chiefs of the various ministries go to various regions without even connection to the security situation. So we have a good understanding what's happening in the fields Also, a lot is helped by partners who are implementing this. And for instance, this emergency directions of such big partners such as IOM, WHO, Doctors Without Borders, the ICRC. They also have a lot of information from the fields, exactly on the beginning phase. After the deoccupation of the Kherson region, we had the full missions for this consulting, where the professionals from the emergency medicine would go there. They were looking at needs and they were resolving how to restore medical assistance with some temporary solutions. They put together the plan for recovery, but that of course concerned some major changes in the front line, like whatever happened in the Kherson Oblast and the occupation of the Kharkiv Oblast. Taras, the question that we have in Q&A, whether do you generalize information, do you summarize information, what concerns you, the healthcare, in terms of the implemented projects through grant funds? Because in the dream, we see what was rebuilt with the state budget of Ukraine funds, and what concerns funds of other donors in the humanitarian sphere. There is a lot of that there. Do you have any general like statistics? Is there anything for your own needs? Yes, we have in essence take into account the data that we collect in terms of destructions. Then we also trying to see how this is done, fully or partially covered. We also have the data about the projects of high level of preparedness, those that have the medical TORs, the cost and estimate documentation, because we use as the source for communication with the regions, looking at various committees, working groups that really take place and talk about the needs. We also have the main, like a general map about the various institutions. Honestly speaking, I don't remember where it's placed, but we have really created with the help of USAID about the damaged healthcare institutions. But once again, let me tell you that in case we do this fully with the like wide spectrum of data, that's a huge number of work and permanent contact with each of these institutions, because the institutions that do require current recovery, they are all in process. We are doing some solutions, the recovery of medical assistance, and definitely they don't have the possibility even to weekly update the situation, how much funds were allocated, what is the process of recovery and what is not. So we really understand that. We really have this attitude of understanding, and we really are looking at major projects that require this, like building up new buildings, etc., etc. Thank you. In reality, this is the question of monitoring. This is something that is in the focus of our project, mostly from the point of view of the control, although, but still, the adequate is the question that after we have posted the full recovery of the institution, it's not that easy to collect all the information and to present it publicly for those, especially heads who are responsible for those, for various institutions. One question I have to Taras and to Zhanna in terms of the prospects of the development of telemedicine in the zone, in the risk zones, especially in Chernihiv Oblast and in the bordering areas. Is there any sense to go to a recovery and provision of services with the focus of providing services where possibly there was the less focus on physical buildings? Maybe Oleksandra could formulate this as an expert, but I'm, as the moderator, I formulated it the way I could. Maybe Zhanna or Taras can start. I understood your question. Definitely, we are trying to be modern, and we understand that medicine and the telemedicine services will occupy a bigger share. Now, we are also using this in difficult cases, what pertain to cardiology, to surgery, but nevertheless, we are working also with the primary care to make sure that telemedicine would come to primary care as well, because this is really about the improvement of access for the rural population to professionals from certain areas of medical knowledge. And that is something that we have certain problem. Let us talk openly. The age of family doctors in the villages, these are very often elderly people who are finding it very difficult to master the computer, and this telemedicine complexes is something really surprising. But in any case, this is in focus of our work. Therefore, in the nearest time, what concerns the primary care, the telemedicine will provide the demand for the medical service. Yeah. I can only confirm that telemedicine is, of course, not a panacea. Of course, there is a human contact is important, especially taking into account a huge need in mental health services and rehabilitations. You can't replace a human. Nevertheless, the telemedicine capacity is also quite important. And let's not look at the telemedicine only as the possibility to make less less visits. Of course, telemedicine works really good, especially in the institutions that don't have adequate technical level. Some very difficult cases, for instance, this telemedicine is working as really a really great instrument to improve the qualification of the doctors, their mentoring, their supervision, where it's not possible to do it in person. So this will definitely continue to develop intensively, and that does meet the overall world trends. We actually had some question about mobile medical institutions. Maybe we can add it up to a question ahead of us. So far, this is the only one. Maybe this will be the last one. This is the question related to Olena Gerasimova in Q&A, whether you are fixing the increase of destructions in the healthcare institutions in 2023, 2024 in the deoccupied Sumy, Kharkiv, and Kherson regions? And do we have any information about the repeated destructions of healthcare institutions? This was mentioned several times in today's performances, but do we have any, at least from your gut feeling, some analysis of how and how big is this risk related to the use of the recovery of institutions here and now? I understand also there was a question mostly to the expensive equipment, but in general, let's divide these two questions. First of all, the question is, what is the statistics related to? I mean, not talking about specific figures, but even in terms of probabilities of the likely blows, likely strikes onto those healthcare institutions which are in risk zones. That's also to a question about the mobile health institutions. And also the question is, what was the increase of the pace of destruction in the deoccupied areas? I would like to ask Anastasiya and Zhanna and those of you who have worked in this. I can only start, just not to say just anything. It's important to compare this. 2023 was quite active in terms of the attacks on the healthcare institutions, whether there's been more or less intensity. It's difficult to say. Yes, there are repeated cases, and they're quite numerous. Very often, these are the cases when they are just damaging different buildings within one single healthcare institution. What actually has been unique to the last half a year, it's the usage of drones, including the attacks on ambulances, something that was really seldom in the beginning of 22. Yes, in the beginning of 2022, this was when they were under shelling, and this was when we lost most of these ambulances. Then there was a certain silence, and we basically suffered when we talked about the basis of some temporary stay. Now, once again, we have regular cases when they're attacked during their trips, and that's in Kharkiv Oblast, Kherson Oblast, these regions. Anastasia, please. Yes, I can confirm this, that there are certain other cases of arrivals to the renovated outpatient facilities. It's very difficult. One of the institutions was fully destroyed after it was renovated. So unfortunately, these cases are not seldom, but I want to say that as an option, we can look at such things as the mobile laboratory. We have the project of mobile laboratories. So when we are teaching Chromadas to develop routes to make use of these mobile ambulatoriums that look like an ambulance, but are fully equipped what should a primary doctor have when they make a field trip, and they going around the communities, Chromadas, where it's not possible to give medical services otherwise. There is also a big risk of attacks in these regions, exactly on any cars, not only mobile ambulatoriums. And I can also, this is confirmed by the fact that we have the program called Humanitarian Hub, when we are buying a lot of for the frontline areas. And yes, we have now started to receive requests for the special equipment, and yeah, we see it in the news as well. This is the tendency that we have. Thank you very much. Also, if possible, I wanted to say, just to follow up with what Anastasia said, we have the same approach not only to mobile laboratoriums, but also the mobile hospitals, when the partners understand that this is a temporary solution, and even if it was installed for several months, and then if the frontline would move and it could be lost, they understand that this potential can be lost. So we do have this support and this understanding of partners who understand that in time they may be lost and or relocated further, and everybody understand that this is in essence, this is like a military loss, and there's not that serious if we are putting in money, if we're investing so close in the near the front line. Yes, this is very much the reality of the 21st century of 2024, where the mobile ambulances should be provided together with the aims to fight these drones back down. So this understanding of donors, that this mobile laboratory or ambulatorium allows to organize this quick service, and probably sometimes this is the only way of construction, because it really is erected quickly, it is prefabricated, and then within several days it's installed, and then the construction team can go further. So this is much less risks, and yes, this is a temporary solution, but this temporary solution not only can give this medical service, but it also can become the center for community where people can come, get some warmth, some water, and even internet. So this is very much comprehensive. Then that's why, yes, they have it. Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, Taras. Zhanna, if you have a comment about this subject, if not, then basically the colleagues have said it all. Yes, these modular mobile ambulatoriums, this is the solution that allows us to provide people with access to medical services in frontline territories. If we talk about Chernihiv region, where we have permanent shelling, we have part of the border with the Russian Federation that is permanently shelled. It's not even recommended by the military to go to the 5-kilometer zone. So the request is, the demand is, because people do stay there in some quantities. What concerns the repeated shellings, unfortunately, they are there. We do fix them. And from the positive, it's the only thing that huge number of destructions that were done in 2022, and only one institution has received the repeated shelling. Thank you. Sasha, then I would like to pass the floor to you for some final remarks of our expert for this subject, and I think we will be finishing on this today. Allow me to show some slides from our presentation. We have some data from the medical institutions and social infrastructure that's mainly medical institutions. We took 3 points, 9th of February, 24th of May, 26th of July. We see that it's been really renovated quite little, but unfortunately the destruction is quicker. We're not able to renew what is being destroyed. And that pertains to the institutions of healthcare, educational, and that's about our adaptability. If we talk about the education, they are starting to build some underground schools, some underground spaces. If we talk about the health protection, we're talking about these modular ambulatoriums, or we have ambulances traveling. But what is good that the government is making sure that this necessary needs would be covered. So this is something that is very much necessary for people, no matter where they are. So, and that's why it's quite adaptive. So another thing which is very important is the capacity of communities. Mr. Taras also said about that. That is what is shown by our monitoring, and what we have also seen, that not all Hromadas can effectively implement their projects, and that's where we have the role of the Office of Recovery to help such communities which are not that capable to make high quality projects and to define how to rebuild and how to search for donors. And I wanted also to say, in terms of the monitoring, it's what Ms. Anastasia said, is that we are also seeing in our colleagues who need to go to these objects, we are traveling sometimes to the rebuilt objects just to make sure we can see what is the barrier-free access, how is, I mean, not all authorities allow us to some objects. We have received several complaints from our grantees that the authorities are not that happy from this idea. We actually had a question about the city of Chernihiv. This was not the healthcare institutions, when in the beginning it was an okay from the authorities that we can go there and we can make photographs. But once there were some arrivals in April, they asked not to come, not to photograph. And this is one of the problems, because we also have a problem with the Mykolaiv region, so it's not like everywhere. So this problem is here, but I do believe that the authorities should understand that this monitoring, it's not for us, you know, not to criticize, it's more to advise, because our grantees from Irpin, they made some good recommendations about the barrier-free access, and I was in one of the ambulatoriums where the director of the institution said that yes, they can take into account what they can take into account, because even some aspects about the barrier-free access, they didn't even think that something isn't coinciding with the best practices in barrier-free access. Therefore, I believe basically this is the most important thing which I wanted to summarize today. And I believe that such dialogues as today, they are very much useful in order that we really zoom in on what is happening in the industry, and where the essence is more necessary and where it is necessary to have more coordination, because I understand that there can't be enough coordination between donors, the government, and the NGOs. So this coordination is very useful. Thank you very much, Oleksandra. Many thanks for participating in today's discussion. Many thanks to the European Union once again for the support of this work. And next months, we will continue to analyze the situation with recovery, and we will continue monitoring. Once again, let me remind you that this presentation that was shown today, it is available in English and Ukrainian on our website. Ukrainian is ready, English will be soon ready. Also, we are searching for some NGOs in order to monitor the recovery of the social infrastructure. We have a link in our comments and on the website of the Economic Research and Political Consultation in the competition of grants, and we'll be very happy to work further with all partners in this sphere, and we would be very happy to see you all at our following events. Many thanks to everybody.